Written and directed by Colm Eastwood, we are talking The Morrigan. And this is a kind of folk horror based on a legend of the Morrigan, which is a Celtic kind of goddess, deity type character. The story is about a team of archaeologists that are going to a sort of excavation off the coast of Ireland, in a kind of small island. And they're led by Saffron Burrows, who you may know from Deep Blue Sea. And she and the team, well, technically she's the second in command over some shenanigans that are going on. But anyway, they uncover this kind of crypt, and inside is the mummified, well, seemingly corpse of this Morrigan, which then kind of infects or possesses Saffron Burrows' character's kind of young adult daughter, who then kind of decides it's go time on killing anyone that gets in her way. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So what does Colm Eastwood bring us with this movie? So, you know, it's a fairly sort of well-produced, slickly made horror film. On the plus side, you know, I've got to say, I think it has some reasonable production. It's not a high-budget movie by any means, but I think it looks relatively good. When we actually see our kind of Morrigan, this kind of creature, actually possesses Lily, the daughter of Saffron Burrows' character, I've got to say I really enjoyed the effects, because she had these kind of glowing eyes, this kind of like, you know, sort of scary look about her, and I think she looks kind of quite threatening, and there's lots of kind of supernatural stuff that's kind of going on all around her and stuff, which kind of ties into the kind of the myth of the actual Morrigan sort of, you know, mythology itself, so to speak. So that was all quite good. I thought it was kind of quite well handled. I've got to say, I think the movie's on a technical level is pretty well shot, and, you know, makes use of this kind of rustic location that it's kind of shooting on, when we see a kind of, you know, some ruins and things like this, and it all looks kind of old and stuff. And it's obviously based on sort of mythology, taking place off this kind of rural place in Ireland. Gives it a sense of isolation and helplessness with kind of our team of characters. They wisely cast a small number of characters, so you know, everyone is somewhat kind of distinct in their sort of personalities and things, and there's not too many sort of characters running around, so you feel like you get a flavour at least of who these kind of people are and what they're kind of all about and stuff. I mean, some are admittedly more fleshed out than others. I've got to say, I think the acting is fairly solid in this movie. I mein, you've got recognisable character actors here. You know, as I've mentioned, Saffron Burrows and James Cosmo, for example. So there's some veteran actors here. So, you know, the acting is at a good standard, I would say. And, you know, for the most part, as I mentioned, I think the production design looks pretty good. I think some good work is done in the cinematography, keeping our Morrigan somewhat in kind of shadow. And there's some really eerie scenes, for example, we're just going to see her glowing eyes looking out through the darkness and stuff. I think it looks pretty good. And there's some reasonable sort of VFX in regards to some you know, body parts and things like this. So, you know, again, this has this kind of somewhat of a polished feel. It looks like it's kind of made with kind of care and attention. So, you know, I got to say, I think for the most part, I think the production is good, and I think most horror fans would probably enjoy it. Where this maybe is not quite as strong, I would say possibly in the script stage. I think the story is nothing special. It's, you know, people find an ancient artifact, someone gets possessed, we get whittled down to the kind of the final person, and then there's the kind of the twist at the end sort of thing. It's very sort of standard in regards to an A to B storyline. Pretty much everything you've got happen will happen here. I do think there are some character alignments, although the characters are sort of well defined in regards to clearly everyone has their sort of personalities. Some of the characters are maybe a little broad. We have this kind of, who is technically in charge of this dig, this guy, and he's like this sleazebag, and he's like a total sleazebag. There's some kind of broad, you know, stereotypes. This guy's an asshole. This guy's like, he just wants to take credit and, you know, is like, seemingly can't help himself. So, things like this. So, the characters are well defined, but not particularly kind of interesting. And I would go as far as to say I do think our two female leads, Saffron Burrows' character and the daughter, are a little bit unlikable to a degree. They're just a tad sort of unsympathetic to a degree. So, you know, you're not completely on board with them. They just seem, I mean, the Saffron Burrows' character just seems to not take her daughter's feelings into consideration at all. And the daughter just seems like a kind of bratty teenager. So, you know, again, there's a little bit of, maybe you're not completely sort of buying in and rooting for these sort of characters. I think the one character I do think is possibly painted as the most sympathetic is the son of the landowner. And then, again, maybe a way that this character could have been fleshed out was to explore this kind of relationship between him and Lily, the daughter. But we only see like one scene together, and then he's already sort of like, oh, you know, phoning up the local priest, which is his uncle, and going, oh, you know, my friend. And well, you've only had one scene together, you know. So it's there are some kind of elements here in this script that I just don't think quite work. And then I've got to say, the final twist, I don't think it makes sense. Now, you could just argue supernatural stuff, the rules don't apply, you know, could be whatever the writer wants it to be. But it didn't really make sense, because if you're looking at the logic that happens, what you see on screen, I mean, well, what you're finished on, to me at least, didn't really make sense. But I guess you could just say magic. So, you know, it's a fair movie. I think it's well produced. I think the script could have been better, to be honest. There are a little bit of occasions where there's a little bit of green screen obvious here and there, but for the most part I think the effects work pretty well. You know, it's a fairly decent movie. I don't think it's a classic. You know, it's a little bit too generic, I think, in its storytelling to be that sort of well remembered, but it's a decent enough watch, I would say, for at least once. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. What were your thoughts? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.